I guess we're just opening this one right into the hard-hitting stuff. Through some combination of a doubted self-worth, a tendency towards privacy, and previously terrible experiences, I was always someone who questioned the basic legitimacy of many relationships. When someone so easily once altered the entire course I thought my life would go down, as I accepted their cold shoulders and nights of silence as just how life should be, I became terrified both of having that alterative power held over me ever again, and also my own ability to hold it over others without even trying. I can imagine someone who loved me seeing a better opportunity for their dreams somewhere new, but then missing it because they refused to even ask someone as habitual as me to move. I can imagine them never having a place which was truly what they dreamed of because of my tastes and my things. I could imagine them tying their finances to me and then everything I do here tanking as they lose every opportunity and a contractual obligation to support me through the worst times. I could imagine never trying to make someone's life worse, and yet so many ways that I could still do so. And that led me to isolate for a long time, or at least should have, but I instead ventured out just to run away many, many times, and I'm only now, some 5 years later, truly given the effort that I should have many times. I hope that I am, at least. It's scary how subjective it can be. Even though I can know how illegitimate those fears are for many reasons, they still exist in my head. And they're what led to the script which follows this. The best attempt I could give at dispelling those fears in me, and it will hopefully in others too. The basic question is, are we holding back the people that we love? This is one of the questions at the heart of Weathering with You. If you've seen it before, feel free to chapter ahead to skip the brief plot summary we're about to do. If not, it'll have everything you need for this video, with spoilers, so beware. Hodaka, a teenage runaway looking to start anew in Tokyo, comes together with Hina, an orphan around the same age, taking care of her younger brother alone, despite the gripes of social services and all the struggles that comes with. They meet mostly by chance, as he's in the right place to receive a moment of her kindness while she's working illegally since she's underage, and he returns the favor as she's being threatened by some less than savory gangsters who want to abuse her desperate need for money. Both struggling as underage characters in a world made for adults, they end up bonding and finding a solution in Hina's power. She's a sunshine girl. There's a myth of girls who can bring sunshine simply by wishing for it floating around, a rarity in this world which is experiencing unprecedentedly constant rain, and it turns out to be less than mythical as Hina shows this ability to Hodaka. As someone more versed in making unofficial cash, a requirement since they don't have ID showing proper working age, he puts the pieces together. Why doesn't she start a business with this power? The demand for sunshine is heavy, from photo shoots to family time, and she's the only one with a supply. She agrees, and the business takes off to great heights. However, as they learn, the role of Sunshine Girl is actually sacrificial. The weather moves in cycles, growing harsh like this every so often and requiring a sacrifice to return it to what we know as normal. The Sunshine Girl is that sacrifice. Hina went a while with these powers not knowing it, but the more frequent use makes her body begin to disappear enough that she can be lifted into the air by strong winds, like an attempt of the heavens to take that sacrifice. With little way to support her family otherwise, a world which is showing little understanding to the situation, and the knowledge that she could better the lives of so many people in preventing Tokyo from sinking, Hina eventually accepts this status and sends herself to the heavens to stop the rain, leaving Hodaka to care for her younger brother. We already asked her side of things in different words. Does she have an obligation to give herself up for others' sake? But this summary also leads us to the other question at the heart of the movie. What is Hodaka's responsibility for her actions, given the business which led to this outcome was his idea and involved his input and actions? In a wider sense, asking this is also to ask how we handle the almost inherent power we have over those who love us. These are the two anxieties that we'll be attempting to quell in today's video. We'll start with Hodaka's end of things. Does he have a heavy hand in her life ending? Well, as far as we can tell, this is something that she wouldn't have done without his input. She does show him her ability, meaning she's willing to use it for other people. However, that was after a moment of bonding, in a situation where she felt someone truly needed to be cheered up. It doesn't feel like these very public moments we see in the montage of their work would happen otherwise with how secret this first one was. This wider use of it is what creates a double effect. First of all, the fading of her body, which makes it feel like an inevitable end. If she's going to turn into nothing soon anyway, then she may as well do it of her own choice and for her own reasons, right? Secondly, the public knowledge and reception of it changes the dynamic. At first, it was almost like a gimmick. A hole in the clouds could open up for a moment to show off something cool, but it's not like it could do much. But over the progression of their work increasing in scope, she sees how effective and important it can be. There are families brought back together, traditions finally able to be seen through, dreams fulfilled after lots of hard work. Many great things suddenly become possible with the rain gone. This means that Hina has a greater awareness of these possibilities for the people she loves. Wouldn't her brother and Hodaka fare better in a world with sunshine with these possibilities? And at the same time, now that people are aware of it, it can almost feel like an obligation. As some even state,
if you could fix this crazy weather with one human sacrifice, I'd be fine with it. Everyone would.
This sentiment must play into her decision, and it only exists because of how public this became. As such, the largest factors which lead to her ending this existence come about from Hodaka's suggestion. I ask this question because we do have to take responsibility for what we make others do. We have an impact on their lives, and we must be aware of that. If we force someone's actions, aren't they really our own? However, that question can't be determined by the impact of the actions alone. It must also include the intent of it. Did Hodaka actually make her do this? And obviously not. As long as we employ regular reconsideration of this fact, this is important to quiet those anxieties. There's a large difference between someone making choices because of your passive presence and you actually forcing their hand. The most that Hodaka ever does alone is pressing the publish button on the listing for the Sunshine Girl business, but even that is something they created together, and so he only had that literally one-click solo. And further, he never convinces her that this is something they have to do after it begins, but rather something she herself finds value in, saying that,
"This job, the Sunshine Girl, for the first time in my life, I found a purpose."
There are even cases which she takes on essentially for no cost, like when some children want to play outside, so it wasn't entirely a financial obligation either, but an active and conscious decision to try and help other people. She even thanks him for this opportunity, for that meaning she found in her life. So all Hodaka really did was exist around her? The important thing to actually consider is what he did or didn't bring into the situation, and as such, what was already there. In this case, everything which was required for this possibility to be made real already existed in her life. It's her power, she made the listing with him, and we see her doing some of the planning as well, and the execution is entirely hers. They're not hyper-professional or anything, so there's no need for real business skills or anything like that. It's just her showing up and doing her thing, because even though he goes too, all of the work could have been done just the same without him. All Hodaka did was bring a new perspective. He looked at a situation which already existed, and adding nothing of his own besides presence, saw a different way in which those pieces could be used. As someone who ran away from home to reach Tokyo, planning on surviving alone, he brings a different look at these factors than someone who, despite still living alone underaged, already has a home and works established jobs by lying about her age. He can see that she needs money, and has the ability to supply something which is in demand, and communicates that information to her for her to then follow through with or not on her own will. That is, essentially, he doesn't say, you should do this, but it's more like, you have the opportunity to do this. Now, this does answer the responsibility part of things. I think we can say pretty clearly that someone isn't to blame for simply showing someone else the already existing possibilities of their life. However, when we combine this with the inherent chaos of the world, so many lives and opportunities clashing and revealing unforeseen consequences, there's still something to be afraid of. Because even if we aren't responsible, it's terrifying that we can alter the lives of the people around us without even trying to. That we don't have to say, move in with me, or move here, or you should get a new job, or meet these people I know, but that all we have to do is be there, and that alone will change things. This is seen best in her motivation being care for others. As we said, a big part of why she gives herself up is because she sees that a world with sunshine would be one which is better for him. Shouldn't she want the best world possible for someone with so much care in her heart? He even says himself,
"A blue sky can make you feel happy that you're alive. It makes you feel more in love with that someone special by your side."
it is his existence which creates these feelings that motivate her, and even if that's not responsibility, that's terrifying because it is a sort of power. How many other decisions could someone make in their life based on this? Are they making a bunch of choices which are limiting their own potential or even making their life worse for our sake? In this case, it even ends her own life to try and make his more ideal. Unless they actively communicate this, we simply might not see the possibilities they're giving up exactly for the reason this started, are different perceptions which influence each other. We may never see our influence or its impact until it becomes too late. How does one not feel some kind of guilt in that?
Hodaka certainly does, deciding to go well out of his way and actively harm his own future to return her to the world. He does succeed, setting himself through the same process to bring them both back. However, it comes at the cost of a criminal record, since he actually threatens the police with a firearm, leading to 3 years of probation back home in the place he hates. This essentially stalls his entire life, leading to a lost 3 years to undo her decision. And this is where things get even more complex, and how that guilt can then drive the other party to essentially do the same thing that made their guilt, to make actively harmful personal decisions for someone else's benefit. This can then re-motivate the first party again, feeding the second once more and creating a cycle of unnecessary guilt which never needed to be and is very hard to end. What kind of obligation does Hina now feel to Hodaka after knowing how much he sacrificed for her, even if she never asked for him to, in the same way that he never asked for her sacrifice? We all know that even if we didn't ask for something, it can still easily create an obligation in our minds though, so it's not something to easily just ignore. If it was, then I wouldn't be making this video right now. So where does this end? Well, we've only looked at one half of things so far, and we need the other side to truly see that. So what is Hina's responsibility to make the sacrifice then? Is it worth removing one human life in order to open the door for many more possibilities in, well, the rest of the lives that there are? In most other situations, this is an easier answer. Arguing that one should survive and do more good makes sense, as there's no reason to give up life in an equal exchange if that life could be used to do a greater amount of good down the line. Stronger, consistent, helpful action later on multiplies the opportunity for good, as then all those impacted have the same chances to add to the total. At least that's the utilitarian take on it, but I feel like that's representative of how many people would think about the situation. Now, this of course applies to real ones as well. For example, you could argue that the best thing for a struggling family might be to overwork and bring in as much income as possible so that the rest of the family has a better future. However, in the process, they could lose access to someone they cared about, and this is more of a front-loading of the income rather than a net gain, as it will wear on the body and mind more, leading to extra costs down the line as well. It's not certain, depending on the situation, either could be right, but the better thing might just be for them to have the person they love around to continue and not to sacrifice. However, there is a logic that Hina is following, and I think it's the kind of fear that many people will carry with them. Yes, she is providing something positive to the people around her. She's supporting a younger brother, and is now a positive aspect of a love interest life as well. These people both want to have her around. But can't they get those same things somewhere else? With someone better? Someone who can give even more? And if she gives them a better world full of sunshine and happier people and more connections, won't they easily be able to get those same things, but in a better world? They could have everything they do now, but also so much more. So why shouldn't she give herself up when all of this is possible and seems so clear? We could summarize the fear into a more real situation as, what if I'm holding them back?
This is a very real fear, and as we just explained, it can have logic to it. Or at least, it can seem to. The logic it uses depends on a relation of possibility and reality. These two things hold an equal, or at least comparable weight. And, coming from the person who always argues the importance of possibility, of exploring over settling, of constant reconsideration of life's aspects, they don't. Possibility is nothing compared to reality. Possibility is what Hodaka provides in his perspective, and reality is what Hina made it through her own actions. As such, if we argue that Hodaka is not responsible for her actions, then we must also argue that her logic is flawed, since the former denotes that possibility is not equivalent to reality. Hina is there because she made her own decisions to be. She examined the possibilities around her and decided on him, something no one else did. Because to prove this non-equal relationship of terms, those last sentences actually apply to two situations. Of course, her sacrifice for him that we've been mostly covering, but also earlier on in the first time she helps him with a free meal at her work. The struggles that Hodaka goes through being a child alone in Tokyo shows exactly why possibility is nothing compared to reality. He was low on money from spending nights in a cheap hotel thinking he could get work, only to find out that even what appear to be shady businesses you think would hire kids immediately throw him out, leaving his plans in the gutter. Because of this, he's sleeping on the streets alone at night in the cold and rain, clearly a child who's in need of help, and yet no one examines the possibility of helping him. Everyone walks right past, and some even actively abuse him for their own entertainment. There were hundreds, maybe even thousands of opportunities to help this child, but only one was made real. The one that Hina decided to make real by giving him a free meal.
Anyone who was stopping in to buy a quick bite could have done the same. For her workplace's prices, where I am in the US at least, it would cost $7. Not to say that's nothing, especially amid rising food costs, and I think there's a greater discussion to be had, in line with some earlier logic we used, about how that responsibility shouldn't be on citizens but on governments. But still, when compared to extending a human life, $7 is nothing. When we truly examine this situation, would we say that those 1,000 possibilities held any weight next to the one action that really helped him? Because possibility can't keep you warm, it can't take care of you when you're sick, it can't introduce you to friends or support your dreams. Possibility alone is nothing, and if it's all you have, then you have nothing. Does it matter that there are more chances, more paths, if no one actually takes them? Increased odds might seem to help, but it still guarantees nothing. They are only what we make of them. Possibility only gains value when our actions make it into reality.
Because possibility is easy. It's basically sitting there imagining things. It is possible that in my future I could be a writer or an actor or a director or a videographer or an engineer or a pilot or a doctor or a teacher or a barista or a cashier or an assistant or a streamer or a baker or a mechanic or an electrician, but I can't actually be all of them. There's or for a reason. Possibility is a concept, this weightless, formless, abstract thing which exists in our minds, witnessing reality and imagining around it. It has no actual consequence to it, because at the scale of imagination's limitlessness, it either didn't or won't happen. There can be 1 million possibilities existing in the same space because there is nothing actually to them, no impact. But there can only be one reality existing in one space, one role, one career, one family, because it has weight, it has consequence. It requires us to expend our stored energy, to take aspects of a limited world and utilize them for a purpose. It will determine the world which the next opportunities are based off of, altering everything which comes afterwards in a way that just imagining something never can.
It's just as Hina's moment of kindness was repaid by Hodaka's moment of kindness, one action coding which possibility will be made next. If she never gave him that meal, would he have seen the opportunity to intervene as he did? It didn't happen just because it was possible. It happened because they made it the most likely one. This shows that reality itself is the origin of likely possibilities and as such should be more important. The only things that happen are the ones that can happen. Opportunity lost is nothing real, no matter how much we might brood over it. Building off of this logic, a consciously crafted reality should be inherently more ideal than imaginative possibility as well. We see this presented in the happy moments that the couple does share, despite their much less than ideal situation. Of course, the potential for these moments is higher in a world full of sun and warmth. We see that clearly in how many people will literally pay for such a thing. It is quite ideal, and so her existence limiting that seems inherently unideal. However, this is once again thinking in this abstract space of could be. To bring it back to reality, we have to ask, does Hodaka's ideal actually contain those things? Based on his reality, are they possibilities which actually hold any weight? We could easily imagine a better situation than the one they're in. To zero in on one example, the night they run away, as the police under corrupt direction are searching for Hodaka and social services, working under the logic that things must be ideal to move forward, are accosting Hina and her brother, forcing both parties to move somewhere new in the cold and rain. The world is flooding more than ever, stalling the trains and filling up all the hotel rooms. So they already can't find a place to stay, and even when they do, the need for ID of age gets them turned away again and again. They're stuck in futility in the rain and cold, even turning into snow for most of the night. It is undeniably a terrible situation. And yet, this night becomes probably the best one they've had together, and maybe even personally in a while. When they do finally find a hotel, they delight in everything they can make real within that room. A bath which also serves as a hot tub, a fridge full of packaged food that they can make a feast out of, and karaoke to sing the night away, and laughter and smiles. It's all simple, all mundane, but also all effective. It's a night so valuable to them that when Hina reveals her condition, Hodaka's response is to offer up many of his life's possibilities to maintain this one reality.
I'll get a job. I'll take care of us.
That's expressly what he's stating here, that he doesn't care about all the things which maybe could happen, but he cares immensely for the things which currently are happening, reality and not possibility. He doesn't want some unknown ideal world with sunshine, he wants his ideal world with the people he cares about, however unideal the situation might be. In his context, in his actions which has shaped this reality, the context of ideal changes drastically and will never match up with a harmfully boundless imagination. Knowing all of this, and I'm going to say this as bluntly as possible because it is to go against the fear the person holds and not the person, can we say that there is any validity to her logic? When she does that, she is discarding the actions which make him truly happy for a nebulous idea of future possibilities which might one day possibly be able to do the same, but probably not, and many of them won't even be something he wants. The cost here isn't all the possibilities which might come to be. The cost is the reality which already came about from the possibilities before it. And even if it was the former, because only a few of them could ever become real in the first place, each one discarding many others, then only a minority of them could actually hold weight and be considered cost. And if that isn't enough, since we're already relying on the imagined future, we could also imagine one which is much worse coming about from her actions. If we work under the logic that possibility can technically become real, then the worse ones are just as valid as the better ones. And since each end is technically infinite, then they should all cancel each other out, leaving only one thing in the middle: reality. This might sound like pseudo-philosophical nonsense, but that's the point. Possibility is nonsense. When you really dig into it, you find that it has no way to dig back into you. To make any sense of it, we have to apply our bounds. we have to truly examine the situation, our actions, their actions, the surroundings, and all the context, and ask not what could be, but what probably will be. What are the actions, not the ideas? Otherwise, we're waiting around abstract nonsense and wasting the reality we already have. So we can use all of this to hopefully reduce the fears we found in those two original questions when we know that it is action and not possibility which truly matters. To start with the first one, we see that it's outright flawed based on that statement. We don't actually hold power over them because the extent of those possibilities aren't as weighty as it may seem, and their decision to make of them as they wish to is their own. We're just one of those possibilities that they choose. And so we should actually take value in that instead of fear. It means that they are choosing to create that weight and limitation, which makes something almost worthless into something entirely worthwhile, and our name is attached to that. It's a pretty literal showing of value. This also addresses the idea of obligation. Working under our fearful thinking, it might become common for us to act out of what feels to be necessity. They're casting off limitlessness for us, and so we must do the same. However, this isn't doing something out of love, it's doing it out of obligation, which might lead to an idea of resentment, especially if we're considering possibility higher to make that decision in the first place. What we should do instead includes, but is not limited to, consideration and communication. Are we already discarding possibilities we don't want in the same way they are, but simply not thinking of it as such because to us, it is a benefit to give up worthless things for a worthwhile one? And paired with this, have we actually spoken with them and confirmed their feelings on this topic to accurately judge this in the first place, that what they're doing is felt as a benefit? I think this is even more beneficial, as two perspectives combing over possibilities will bring a clearer, more average head to exclude the unlikely ones, as well as setting proper expectations and examining efforts. I also say this to stress an important fact. It isn't simply a binary of making someone do something and making it possible for someone to do something. There is a space all in between where we are both opening that door and also starting to pull them through it just a little bit, where we do actually hold some power over them. And what that means is that for everyone, this will all be different. If someone is more resistant to change and someone else is always looking for it, that pull will lead to different effects and perspectives on its force. All this is an attempt at providing an idea of what those things could look like. But the only definitive answer in your situation is the communication that you are going to have in your own examination of it. And on the other end of those initial questions, we might believe that they could, or even should, find someone better than us. But that possibility means nothing if it isn't their action. Their decision to continually choose us, that is to craft this reality out of all other possibilities, is the specific weight and importance which disproves the fear. It is 1,000 could-haves turned into one single did. The idea of what could happen in the future has none of that because it is unbounded, unlimited. It is them at their entirely idyllic best or worst. And is that the reality of the person you know? Further, on the idea of focusing in more, we should look at those possibilities which actually have some basis in the reality they're choosing. If all of their actions are trended in one direction, what's the real likelihood that that will change? It's not likely that they'll jump from entirely discarding one branch of possibility to suddenly trying to claw back its extents in a now much harder to fight battle. We can't help which possibilities exist way into the future, and we could destroy ourselves thinking about them. But the decisions we make right now dictate the actual odds of which ones could become real and which couldn't. So what more is there to do than to take all of this and focus on the reality which is being crafted in this moment to prevent the ones we don't want? Do we want to miss that control we do have and let wild things happen down the line like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or do we want to make a reality which is full of happy moments to code the next possibilities? Once again, the advice includes, but is not limited to, consideration and communication. To ease worrying about a future which only might happen and which only might be ideal, we should speak with them and see what those odds actually are in their mind. What is their ideal and what is their future that they're looking towards? Just as with the other side of the fears, we must determine this ourselves continually and reasonably. There's also one sort of meta thing to stress about this movie. It only makes sense because they're 15-year-olds making 15-year-old decisions. We can easily examine how they could have acted more reasonably rather than failing to communicate and taking such drastic actions immediately instead. The idea of running off into the night with no plan is extremely dangerous, and to so flippantly promise away our entire future is crazy. Those words still hold weight, but they are probably casting off too much possibility, settling entirely before one has even examined what their reasonable options are. This is to say that none of this has been a message of go ahead and settle now, because your situation could be unhealthy, or you could be inexperienced enough to not know if it's a bad fit. It's not that we should cast off all possibility, just that we shouldn't get lost in it. And I think we see that when Hodaka returns to Tokyo after his 3-year probation as well, with a college entrance exam book on his desk, directly going against his childlike claims of somehow immediately getting a job and supporting this runaway child. It's good to see that they grow up a bit and learn that they should actually consider some more possibility in some cases, because the conflict of the movie comes about from both seeing no possibility, as we immediately just covered, and also from seeing way too much possibility, as we covered for most of the video. The key, disappointing as this is always the answer, is balance. Which is the appropriate level for our context, for our situation. Others can give you guidelines, but no one can tell you that balance but yourself and your own careful examination. And that's kind of the whole thing in the end. Most of this topic was applied to relationships, but it has a broader appeal to our lives in general. There is a lot of opportunity. There are great ones and terrible ones, and they can come about and around us without our input, leading to terrible things, to unfair situations, to a lot to handle which no one should have to. It's chaos consuming our beings and creating all these fears and these anxieties that we have for a reason. But the counter to that, the certainty and the calm, is in our decision. Based on what has happened to us, which are the ones we're choosing to move forward? What is our input into that chaos to ease the fears and to make something real out of the endlessness? If there are truly infinite possibilities, then that means there must be one close to our situation, one within reach, which is better than the one we are experiencing right now. Not something too far off to brood over, or something which comes about years down the line if all of this, and this go right, but something with balance, something right there. Take the kids, for example. That good night they had was because their possibilities were limited to the things that they could realistically do then and there in that room to make themselves happy, to the packaged meals and a gimmicky bathtub. They could have easily sat there and entirely rightfully complained about how horrible their world is. They would have been entirely within their reason to do so, because that is true. And this is the real unfairness of the world, that we can say it is perfectly reasonable, but also must ask, what would that have done for them to sit there and complain? Instead, they were clearly able to take these actions which made it a fantastic night. To take those negative feelings and turn them into positive action, whether that's just for oneself or against a system to one day make it so others don't feel the same way. In small and hard-fought-for ways, they and we make good nights out of our own will to do so. Faced with endless possibilities, there's only one way to guarantee those small steps towards a better future, and it's what they did, taking the active choice to grab the ones within reach and upwards. And against all that cruelty and unfairness, this process slowly keeps making more of those upwards reachable possibilities, so until there is a reasonably ideal one that we can claim as our own. I don't think that's how it should be, and I hope that one day the process is made much easier and helped along from those who can and should do a lot more. But as it stands, we have to craft these realities from the possibilities within reach. This step is always the first, and always the next, and always the next after that. It is our power against everything to create one thing. It is our calm against those fears.